please start.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. As you may know, my name is Ximena Bonilla, and I am going to present a topic related to English teaching from the view of race, new understandings and horizons. This is how I call it. So, well, I'm going to show you very quickly how I have divided my presentation today. First of all, I'm going to talk about my background a little bit, and then I will tell you what is this thing we call race, what is the conceptualization. Then I will talk about some epistemological relationships of this theory with others. And then I will talk about race and ELT connections. And finally, I will try to be a little bit practical on the topic and show you some ideas of how to put this into practice. Well, first of all, before starting the whole presentation, I would like to say that the idea of this is that you can see teaching how improving your profile as a teacher, and whenever you talk about your profile as a teacher, you need to think of two things: how you improve your teaching, but also how you can complement this with research and how research helps you to develop different paths. This is what has been happening to me, and this is an invitation for you to see. And I would like to address the topics in these three areas. Well, first of all, I am going to tell you why a person in the field of language teaching ends up developing a project in race, this topic of race. So what in the world was the idea connected with this topic? So first of all, I would like to say that I have been an English teacher, probably as many of the ones who are here today. And throughout, well, before in my previous experience, I started being interested in how to teach English, how to make it better, how to improve my practice. And in this road, I also found that critical pedagogy was enlightening me my experience, because I could see that I could do more than just teaching a language. That while I was teaching the language, I could do much more for my students, and that probably I could do something for the world, and that was revealed through critical pedagogy. This fight for social justice and transformation was something that started to transform my practice. I was also interested in terms of interculturality, and I developed some research on the area, because I found interesting to see how when you are learning a language and teaching a language, you are having this knowledge of different types of cultures and how these cultures interrelate. So that was part of my background. And when I started my doctoral program, I was not really familiar with the topic of race. And I found when I went into the doctoral program, I found this subject that was called race and education. And I was not really having any expectations about the subject, because I didn't know anything about it. And probably, as many people think, I related race with probably Black people or histories of Black people. But then I realized that this had to do much more with many experiences that are related to everybody, and that I was also included in those experiences, and that through an idea that was called Whiteness, I could understand many of the aspects and elements that were related to what I do and how I feel in the world, and how I am as an English teacher could be involved in power relationships that I was not aware. So I found this as an enlightening experience, who gave me another dimension and another view of this interculturality interest and language teaching. And that's what I'm trying to do today with you. Well, in order to start this exercise, I want to do a little exercise with you, so I don't keep on talking by myself all the time. So I would like to you to think of a word. I will tell you a word, so I would like you to have a first image and think of that image that you have when I tell you the word. Well, you don't have to talk because we don't have a lot of time, but just think about it. And if I said to you, indigenous woman, think of what you have in your mind when I said that word. Just the first image that you have in your mind, okay? Well, so now you would probably have this image similar to what you were thinking, right? How many people say yes or no? I don't know if I can see the chat here, can I?
Yes, I think you can. Yes, you can.
Should I open a window?
Yes, just like if you click there in options, I guess you can click on chat.
Oh, I don't see it.
All right, so if you want me to, I can read out for you. There is no
Yes,
problem.
please.
So
Yes, please.
it's okay, no problem. So before you showed the image, people said, first one to answer was Yesid Ortega. Thank you very much for attending here. So he said, beautiful. Ana Peñalosa said, bravery. Aleida said, okay, so Juan Carlos said, Guajira, rape. Another person says nature, yes, Aguayu or an Embera woman, cultural, rich culture, epistemicide, no, it was different. And after you showed the image and some people said yes and some others said no. Some other comments were wisdom and deep connection with nature, folklore, and so forth.
Can I ask you how
Sure.
the balance between yes and no? Many yes and many no's?
There were more yes than no answers.
All right, okay. That's good because that's what I was expecting. Probably this is the first image, but I don't know how many people probably thought about this one. Oh, this is stating. It's not moving.
If you could please, not Ximena, but all of you guys, if you could turn off your cameras so that connectivity could flow a little bit easier. Thank you.
You are becoming an expert on these things, right?
It's been like 3 months already with this. So.
Okay. So this is I was trying to say that probably the first image you have was this big one that I'm showing here, but I don't know, probably some others thought of this second one, but probably fewer people than in the first case. And I don't know how many people thought of this third image that is also related to the same idea, right? However, this little exercise is just to show you that probably when we have ideas about certain groups and about different people, we usually have fixed ideas of these groups, and that these ideas, well, we need to ask ourselves, why do we have those fixed ideas? Why don't we think we are probably missing part of the story, or we are probably missing a perspective of that idea that we are trying to get? Well, so now to make it a little bit more practical, because I was really recommended that this exercise was expected to be practical, so I tried to do my best. And I'm gonna ask you to try to answer the questions that we have here. So you can use the chat as well again to write your answers. I'll give you a minute. So which country are we talking about?
For A,
Nigeria. For number one, more than 4 million of its inhabitants are trapped in deep poverty. So what's the answer for that, Jair?
People are writing for A, B, Nigeria, B, C, number one is C, number one, USA. Just it says B, A, C, A, C. So there's a variety of answers here.
All right, okay, so we are not sure about it. Then the second one, their film industry is big business. It contributes 5% to national GDP. Answers?
B, UK, Nigeria. B, Nigeria again. Nigeria.
Right.
C, so in this case would be USA. It says Yazid, and Wendy says B as well. So we have some
Okay.
more B's than C's.
Okay, that's good, that's good. Number 3, 47.8 million people in this country are Black.
Carlos says D. Ana Peñalosa says D. Joanna says C. B, C, C. So there is between B's and C's.
Okay, great.
And
the
then,
last one.
all right.
Oh,
No, it's okay.
that's okay. It is known for producing good quality rum and cocoa. Answers?
A, 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 A.
Okay,
I think
that's
it is
probably, thank you. So that's probably the easiest one, right? But as we are talking about these fixed ideas, probably it was clear that the easiest one wouldn't be the answer, right? Well, okay, here you have the answer key. So did you have the answers right or not? What do you think? You have the answers right or not? Yes or no?
1 out of 2. Oh no, it says 2 out of 4. Carlos says 2 out of 4. Anybody else?
Right. But as
2
we could
out of
see,
4. Yes. So basically 2 out of 4, 2 out of 4. Yeah. UK has poor people too, folks. Yes, says Desir Ortega. 2 out of 4, 2 out of 4. Yes, basically 2 out of 4.
all right. Okay. So as you can see, probably it was well, different answers. It should be easier to answer this short survey, but it's not that easy because we have these fixed ideas about different groups and how these groups are distributed around the world and how their characteristics are well known by people around the world as well. Well, we will do the last exercise just to go in depth with the topic. And this is related to the English class and English lessons. So there are 2 cases in which there are 2 teachers in different situations. We will read the case and I would like to listen probably 1 or 2 people in each case to give me an opinion of this activity the teachers have prepared and have developed, okay? I don't know if it is better reading or not because I feel so silent here.
It's okay. We are all here super active, interacting with you in the chat box.
Okay.
So it's okay.
Because I feel lonely.
It's okay. Well, you are not. We have 48 people interacting with you.
Okay, great.
Samuel is already done.
Okay. So is Samuel then willing to participate and telling us what he thinks about this activity?
If you want to open your microphone, Sam. Also, in the meantime, I'm going to read what Carlo wrote. He says, aspirational ideas, tourism, travel, money, and so on.
Okay.
Maybe Carlo, if you want to share with us your ideas.
Yes, what it's something that I have mentioned before, and that it is that we usually start working with cultural aspects more in a superficial way or in a shallow way. We value the interaction with the native speaker, but then we focus on traveling, important places, tourism, money. We kind of promote this view of the countries as they are perfect, right? It's sort of what Yesid mentioned a minute ago. UK also has poor people. So we tend to view these countries as aspirational, the places where we want to go or follow this American dream or British dream. So even though the practice, the language practice is good, probably people would get a partial view of what the countries are, or of how the countries are.
Thank you very much. And any other little opinion, please?
Aleida, if you want to help us here.
Thank you, Aleida.
Yeah, I was just chatting. Good afternoon. I was just chatting in the box that my perception is that the students might end up having only the representation of only one person out of millions of that country. So in that case, the rich cultural capital of the country is reduced. People will go home having the idea of what that person, that particular person of that country has about his or her country, and that is reducing the cultural capital of the country to one vision of it.
That's right. Perfect. Thank you very much.
There is one more. I would like to, I'm sorry, I'm going to just like here. There's one person who wrote something. Chris, if you want to share with us what you wrote.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm actually a Londoner, so I'm English, and I think that anytime you can interact with a native speaker is a good thing, especially because the English language is spoken in so many different countries and we have so many different accents that any exposure to a native speaker can only be positive. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, and there are some other comments, but I guess we should move on. Or
yes,
all right.
we don't have enough time, but
all right.
Thank you very much for your comments. I will go through the presentation referring to these comments and these situations. Let's see the last situation, and I will explain how they are related to the topic afterwards. But 2 comments about this as well, please. Okay. Can we listen to 2 comments, please? What is your opinion about the teacher's attitude in this case?
They are typing their comments. So in the meantime, I'm going to take advantage of the time and I'm going to read some previous comments to the previous, some comments previous to this question. So Carlos says, it is an authentic exercise and great way to connect with a native speaker on a personal manner. Great. Ana Peñalosa says, it seems as if the teacher is happy to see his or her students interact, but he or she knows little about the students' inner thoughts or feelings. Javier Sierra says, the information may seem interesting at a first glance, however, somehow shallow. And Jasid says, any interaction with a native speaker of Waju language is great. Now, we're still waiting for your answers in regards to this second task. Feel free to just like either write them down or raise your hand so that we can listen to your comments.
Thank you, Yair. It's good to listen to someone's voice.
Ana, if you want to help us. Ana Peñalosa, please.
Hello, good afternoon. I was just saying that the teacher here is saying that he does not speak properly, and so that tends to foment the same stereotypes that children might be having. It seems to create more like xenophobia in the classroom and also outside of it, and it doesn't do justice to social justice education. Is what.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Johan, if you want to share with us, Johan Tiria.
Yes, well, so I agree. I do agree with Anna in the sense that I consider teacher is also fostering this kind of a stereotype about people who live in Venezuela or Venezuelan people, and it's really hard to try to integrate them when you do those comments now. So I consider interculturality and all the things that we do as teachers are better in order to foster respect and also tolerance and all those things of values with them in that sense.
Right, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I'm going to go on. These exercises are ideas that may illustrate different types of representations of the topic that I'm going to talk about. But why do we have these ideas about race? How is race connected to us? And well, actually, later on, I will talk about race. Race is a social construction, and we say that it's a social construction because it has been influencing us, all of us, through different means. And sometimes these discourses come from macro discourses, such as the policies and politicians who reproduce or defer their ideas at a macro level. But some other times it becomes with mass media and other type of discourses that we usually are having contact with, and we consciously and unconsciously most of the time acquire these discourses and make these discourses ours. And one of the main means to expand these discourses is education. So that's what is more related to our field, and this is what I'm going to talk about. How do we get these discourses about race? And well, first of all, in the way we learn, in the materials that we use in class, and how the representation of different cultural groups is used as a way to show people occupying different spaces and different hierarchies. Usually these hierarchies become racialized, which means that some have the power, usually white, and the others are segregated or discriminated. This has happened around the world, and it is in Colombia. It has happened as well. Throughout history and throughout our education, we have received multiple images, multimodal discourses that have influenced us and that made us believe what we have as this cognitive device that I was talking about in the beginning. So what is race then? I was talking about race as race as a social construction. Despite that, some of the theoreticians that have talked about or have referred to race said that race is a biological concept. This counterpart says that there is a social construction, which means it was created by men, and also men use it for different interests. And some people also in critical race, in race theories, state that this concept was created in the modern discourses of scientific research, in which they try to classify different groups. But despite this group, these studies were denied and they were invalidated because of lack of consistency. Very soon, the discourse of race stayed there and persisted throughout the time. And despite that, the concept was attacked, and they say that it was people said the same studies confirmed that this didn't really existed. It appears to be real, and people accept it even to nowadays, many years later. And we talk about race as if it was real, and that's why some authors say that race is fiction. It seems to be real, but it's not real, but people interact with it as it existed there, and it established differences and reproduced practices that are affections because of the concept of race. Well, the theory that I use in this the perspective of my analysis is critical race theory. This critical race theory, as you can see in the pictures, despite that we always, when we think of race, we usually think of Afro-Colombian groups or indigenous groups, or we think of slavery, which are those fixed ideas that I was referring in the beginning. Well, race and racism has changed, and it has been movable along history in many different ways. And as we can see here, it has to go with ideas of not only phenotype, which are the physical characteristics, but also religious groups, nationalities, and different types of relationships that have established these hierarchies in which some groups were considered more privileged than others. They have in these principles, they call something that is called interest convergence, which is related to these different historical moments in which groups could be in advantage or disadvantage depending on the social characteristics. That's if we remember this situation about the Venezuelan child. Well, it is the specific historical moment that we are living now, in which we know that social and political and economic characteristics of the situations have made this group to be marginalized in certain way, discriminated at right now. But it was not the same before. Some years before, they had a different status, and that's why we cannot think that race and racism happen in the same way in every context. And this is also why they talk about revisionist history, which means that whenever we want to know about race, we need to know about the context, we need to know about the history, and we also need to compare those macro discourses that have been related to these groups, and to contrast these discourses with the voice of individuals to see what are the gaps in history. These critical race theories also talk about critiques for liberalism, in which they say that liberalism uses this colorblind attitude towards race, just defending the idea that we are all the same, but they do state that references do exist and that we need to account them in order to be aware of inequality. And if you remember in these pictures of the indigenous woman, they represent probably different moments of an indigenous woman, but also different contexts and also different social characteristics that have made her be represented in that way. So critical race theories go to deep to these stories to understand what is the general picture of the context, to say that the problem really exists in the way that we interpret it. And they also talk about structural determinism, which has to do with these big narratives that are created throughout different times and which make us like kind of forget or see the panorama incomplete. So we cannot see what happens in reality with the different groups because we just see the surface. And that was related in this example of related to only the superficial factors of culture, or only see some ideas that are general or general for everybody, like these ideas of like Black people are only in Africa, and that poverty, there is no poverty in countries like the UK, and as Carlos said, those are the big narratives that we need to go and explore and compare, and that's what critical race theory appeals to say. Well, there is another important concept in critical race theory, which is whiteness, and whiteness is a theory itself. Whiteness, beyond the concept of whiteness as a characteristic of phenotype, has to do also with this condition, this condition that becomes mental, that becomes a way to understand the world. And critical race theories claim that because we are in a whiteness-centered world or society, it is difficult for us to understand the way in a different way, the word in a different way. And the problem of this whiteness condition is that we attempt to get this whiteness. It's like a property. We want to get it. And that's why we also feel uncomfortable with who we are. We are not comfortable if we are not white, and we want to get that. So this is really it has a lot of specific characteristics that I will explain a little bit more. But usually when we are English teachers, we are also developing many of these whiteness center attitudes and beliefs, and I will explain how that is happening. These are some of the common terms of critical race theory, which describe different ways in which racism, racialization happens. And I'm not going to mention all of them because that would be too long, but I would mention some of the most important ones, which is whiteness. Whiteness is important for critical race theory in order to understand that we have this idea that there is always something better, and that is usually white, and that we want to pursue it. And this whiteness is also understood as standard, objectivity, or neutrality, because why? Because usually these big narratives are created and from the Eurocentric point of view, and more contemporary times from ideas in the United States. And that's why they also said that white populations or embodied individuals with whiteness liked or prefer feel favor because of whiteness, because it is a condition created because of those discourses that are circulating that make us believe that this is always better. And this is influencing in the English teaching. For example, when we are English teachers, we always see that there is an advantage of these people that look white as they are English teachers. I read a story which was very interesting, in which there was an indigenous teacher that was an English teacher, but she used to have a very hard time in order to get a good job because she didn't look white, and she was kind of rejected in some of the jobs that she applied because she was not the ideal white native speaker. Well, some of these concepts are the ones that are discussed in critical race theory, and that made us understand how these power relationships happen between individuals, and that take some advantage or disadvantage to different groups. Critical race theories have also two divisions, I can say, like two interests, two perspectives. Some critical race theories think that discrimination and racism is a matter of thinking, mental categorization, attitudes, and discourse. And this is why we need to work in educating people, changing these symbols or changing these representations we have about different groups. However, there is another group which is materialist critical race theories, and they believe that differences between groups do exist, and they agree that there is a difference between representations, but they think that these differences are not only representations, that the differences are material, and that if we want to change the system, we really have to act. It's not just with trying to change people's mentality. We really have to do something in order to change the perspective of the world. And the world is unjust because it's divided into these racial differences. Okay, so, well, I will go with these similarities, because as I know, critical race theory is not a very common theory, or I haven't heard of this theory in the context of Colombia, probably because many times we think that in Colombia there is no racism, and this is a very usual common sense. When I am researching about the topic, and whenever you talk about the topic to English teachers especially, they usually say that there is no racism in Colombia. And probably because we also relate racism with skin color, but as we can see in critical race theory, racism and race doesn't happen only in relation to skin color, but in other multiple areas. So critical race theory, to something more common for us or more close to us is critical pedagogy. And critical pedagogy and critical race theory share some principles too. Both of them are interested in the centrality and in the intersectionality of race and racism. However, critical race theory is more interested in race and racism than critical pedagogy is. But they are both interested. They both challenge the dominant ideology in terms of material and idealist perspectives. They both had a commitment with social justice. And the importance of experiential knowledge is also important for both of them. We never know the whole picture if we don't know the in particular individual experiences. The use of interdisciplinary perspectives in order to understand a phenomenon. And I would say that critical race theory focuses on the voice of the oppressed, which many people know them as minorities, and which they don't accept these labels either, because those labels are, well, ways of organizing the word and saying that minorities is minor than majority. So, well, this is also a question, but that's the way we need to refer in order to understand what are the main objectives. Critical race theories and critical race pedagogy have common goals and they represented this chart, which is important to understand their goal. We can see that in this axis, you have one axis that is related to the stages which can go from less critical to more critical. And on the other axis, you can see motivations to change, which can go from low to high motivation. So critical race theory, as well as critical pedagogy, think that if you are on the corner bottom down, on the left bottom down corner, you usually think you are like in a magical stage. You believe that nothing can be done to change, and that you believe that everything that happens to you may be a matter of luck or fate. And so that makes you think that you don't have to do anything, you just feel comfortable with the system. However, you need to increase this awareness of how the social world is organized. And whenever you are earning this awareness, you start feeling more motivated to change it. And the goal is that you have a high critical stage, so you understand the world better. And then because you know that the world is structured, then you attempt to change it. And that's the goal of both of them. There is another theory which is close to critical race theory, which is the colonial project, and that's probably more familiar to you because as I have seen, well, many people at this moment are interested in the colonial project. Critical race theory as well as the colonial project have common goals, as you can see in the middle, that were also mentioned in critical race theory, some of them. However, I would say that they have like different objectives in terms of the critical race theory. The main objective of critical race theory is to dismantle racism and race as an unjust practice. However, the colonial project is more interested in changing the epistemology of these ways that we have been subjectivized. So, but there is a common term that is used in both of them, which is whiteness device. And this whiteness device is the one that I was talking in the beginning, which is this idea that we have incorporated on this belief that what is white is always better. And whenever you have whiter is better, and whiter in terms of phenotypical characteristics, but also it has to do with this idea of civilization, intelligence, education. So whenever you think this is related to more Western ideas, it is also related to whiteness. And this is shared by both of them. Well, so now I am going to show you what is, I'm not the first time talking about race and ELT. And as I was through research, I realized that some people in TESOL and ELT have already started talking about race and racism, and that they have found probably similar characteristics of what I found, in which when we are teaching a language, we are developing an intercultural activity. And this intercultural activity involves power relationships that are related to colonialism, missionizing, globalization, and that whenever we do these things, there are relationships that favor or that put a group in disadvantage. But what other people as Pollock here says, usually TESOL academics are not interested in race because they probably believe that the relationships between different cultures are not asymmetric, and that we are raceless. So we don't have differences that are based on skin color, and that that these differences don't provide other impact on the practices that we develop. And so it is really a questioning why we as English teachers, we don't really believe that we are involved with race. And he kind of criticizes that the word of TESOL is color mute, that it is being color blind. We don't believe that there is this difference, but it is necessary to appoint these differences so we can understand better how these relationships happen. So what is the general goal of critical race theory? Is actually questioning the system, but questioning the system in terms of how we see the world and how the world we also have fixed ideas about different parts of the world and how the people that belong to different parts of the world behave and how they are. And that usually these ideas are also developing hierarchies. So the critical race theory tries to question if we are Black, and when I say Black, it's not only Black people, but the ones that are different from white, that are in a white dominant culture, or if we are women in a patriarchal society, or if we are young who speak dialects and don't speak standard accents. So they consider this is a habitus which is enduring, and this is what we need to transform. So now let's see what is the context of ELT and their whiteness centrality. We have knowledge production that has been also criticized because usually is whiteness center, produced in whiteness center countries, and produced by not other areas in which we reject and ignore other kind of knowledge production. For example, there is a lot of information in ELT from India. In India, as it has acquired English teaching from a long time ago, they have developed a lot of theories which have been very valuable in the field. But I don't think that here in Colombia we have been interested a lot in these theories, for example. We have also had these ideals of native speakers who are usually white, and as I was explaining with this experience of this indigenous teacher before, these ideas also favor or give privilege or give a not very good status to other kind of people. It has this whiteness center attitudes has also made us lack this awareness of sociocultural elements in our own context, and this has been criticized in literature in language teaching. We also know that that languages have gained different status and educational practices as well. So as we can see in indigenous languages in the context of Colombia, for example, don't have the same prestige as English and other languages. We have also suffering of having new marketing goals beyond or more interested than educational interest. Teaching in our case has been seen as applying theories more than producing our own theories. And we have also suffered a lot of policy borrowing, and we know what has happened with the Common European Framework, which has been also more than imposition acquired by us and also identified in us as teachers. So if we are in a Whiteness Center environment in ELT, let's go back to the action lines. The action lines then, and I go back to this first slide when I was talking about teaching and the teaching profile in two different dimensions, in teaching as a researcher. And usually when we talk about teacher, we think of what to teach and how to teach it. And that's why I put this bubble in highlighted because it says teaching race. Well, I cannot see the teaching race and not racist contents in EFL. That would be probably what we think is the main interest when I'm related ELT and race. However, it has to do with teaching English with race sensitivity, which is all of these related to the attitudes, the selective position that I take when I use my materials, when I approach the contents of my classes, when I address my students, as we could remember in those examples in the beginning. How I address my students, what are the contents that I include in my students, what is the attitude that I involve in when I develop these contents as well. And also new areas that I need to explore and not just traditional areas. So what are the action lines? I'm talking first about teaching English with race sensitivity. And this has been already called by different authors in multiple ways. Some of them have called them multicultural, militant, other epistemology, anti-racist, culturally responsive pedagogies. All of them different names, but they all addressing the same thing, trying to develop pedagogy that develop more equate practices between different participants, and that we could see cultures in different, in more just positions. So first, include voice in curriculum, which is not only white voices in the curriculum, that has to be with including materials that are not only related to Whiteness Center countries such as the United States or the UK, but other countries too, multiple words. And what ways we talk about the other countries, we could include, but we could include the stereotype visions of different groups. Commitment with diversity, so we know that there is diversity, and we are also committed in making our students understand this diversity, including other intellectuals in the way I conceptualize my own profession, that I develop cultural-oriented pedagogies, and is not only to see the other's culture, as you remember in the first case when this was the class of the native speaker talking about England and everything, so that's okay, but it is only showing part of the story, as some of the participants were saying. We need also to relate with other cultures, and that there is commitment with racism and discrimination. So we are interested that these practices that reproduce racism are not reproduced by us. Well, so I'm just trying to illustrate here how would be that decentralization of Whiteness curriculum, which is giving the voice to other people, such as indigenous, not standard images of people, such as rural people, queers, and rural teachers, so we can know other realities and not just the stories that we always listen about different people and the same stories. And what is the way? Critical race theories talk about de-silencing race, which has to do with empowering those voices that have never been heard and showing them from a different perspective, because they are usually shown a view that still discriminates them in a different way. So what they are trying to say is that it's necessary to put them as protagonists of other type of stories that could be highlighted. It's highlighting struggles. Usually these minorities, as I said before, they usually struggle to gain a place in society, and we can develop a pedagogy that tries to highlight these struggles more than continuing with this disdain discourses against some social groups. Producing, as teachers, producing more than consuming, and promoting more criticality with our students. That was related about teaching sensitivity, race sensitivity. This is related about teaching raising content in the EFL, and this is an example that I have taken from two authors that developed an experience with students, ESL students, that were taking an academic writing course, and that they try to make them aware of the race relationships that they have with different groups. So they, through literature, they make students experience the experience of racism and discrimination of these specific groups, and to understand these stories from their point of view and not just as an outsider, as we always see. It is usual for us to understand race as something that is not part of us, is part of the other. And they make this, they propose that it is important that we may experience, if we have had these experiences of race at any time in our life, but the thing is that sometimes we are not aware of them. So making them better aware as a first step, and then conceptualizing, trying to explain what that means, and then analyzing all the factors that surround this particular case in order to see how social historical elements influence the factor to understand it in the way it happens. And as a last stage, they propose applying action in the real situations. That means asking the students to develop something, to do something about that specific situation we were providing to them, to think that they could transform these practices. And I was including here pictures of like our childish, but because they represent that this can be done throughout all the levels, but well, you approach activities in different ways in terms of reaching the same thinking stage. And this slide wants to illustrate what are the areas that probably will be the interest of critical race theory in this case. So we can look as ELT teachers, we can look at other ways of researching our own practices and how these practices could be means to produce or reproduce or change these race structures. Well, some of these topics you can see, exclusion, open discrimination, authoritarian pedagogy, are all of them interests of race, critical race theory. And just concluding this presentation, I don't know if I'm okay with the time. Yes, I think so. Okay. Concluding this presentation, I would say that the main purpose of this approach to education and to language teaching is to foreground all the stories, to turn the gaze, and to see that despite that we have these ideas that that probably in some contexts are perpetuated, such as that the Black people are lazy, and that in Colombia this is not strange. We could associate, for example, people who are costeños with laziness and things like that, which are stereotypes that have been reproduced. And that we need to break by telling other type of stories. There have been people in these groups that have been also successful, and that stories are not told and are known are not well known by us, and we need to, well, so we could change and we can transform these narratives, these big narratives that have been created throughout the time. And just included here a small example in which in the study, in a study that I was presenting, the teachers realized that students understood that despite that they thought that the image of Black women, that Black men was as violent, they understood that it was not really violence, but it was a fight for human dignity and strength in the particular moment in which they were living and how they reacted to the social situation. So this is just my general conclusion. And here I leave a slide with some of the representatives of this theory and the contributions that they provided to me to understand better how this could be projected in the language teaching. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Ximena. I think if you stop sharing your screen, you could have access to the chat box now, so that you can actually see all. I know that you are not going to have enough time to read all the comments that people wrote throughout your presentation. They were super interactional here. I mean, like, there were comments all over throughout your presentation. So that was super interesting. Everyone was engaged with your presentation, with the topic. Many people commented. Very clear. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Professor Ximena, thank you very much. Well, I don't see questions after you're finished. Thanks a million. Excellent webinar. Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation. Thanks indeed, Professor Ximena. Wonderful presentation, and so forth. But I don't see any questions. Are you, Ximena? Can you have access now to the chat box?
I'm trying to.
Okay.
I'm checking where because I'm not very familiar with Zoom and don't use
All
it
right.
very frequently. But yeah, I think I got it. Yeah, I got it.
All right, great, awesome. All right, awesome. So they are asking you for your email, if you want to share your email. And once again, just want to clarify that this webinar, as well as the other ones that we have had in ASOCOPY's webinars, you can find them in the YouTube channel of ASOCOPY. So you go to YouTube, you type there ASOCOPY, and then you can find all the webinars that we have held during these 3 last months. So we have 17 webinars. Everyone is congratulating you. I guess you already are there. All right, Yesid has a question for you if you want to.
Okay, there is a question. Yes, Yesid. Thank you, Yesid, for coming. I wonder how can we, LT teachers, can translate the ideas of Black Lives Matter from the US context in the Colombian context in our classrooms? Well, I think that, well, if we try to translate it, like translate it, it would be difficult, but we can understand the race area in a different way. So how it happens in Colombia. And in Colombia, I think the idea of whiteness device that has been developed by Castro Gomez, which is a Colombian person, a Colombian author. I think we can understand better that racism in Colombia happens differently from the United States. In the United States, it has based a lot in skin color and these differences, phenotypical differences. In Colombia, it happens, but it happens more in this idea of who is white. Even though we don't talk about white, we don't usually use this word, although indigenous people do. But we usually talk about mestizos. Because we are mestizos, we believe that the racial problems are not affecting the main group, which is the main group which we have been believing is mestizos group. And well, in the history of Colombia, which was well, the main context in which I want, yes, that's what Jessit is saying. Like we have this highlighting of whiteness. I don't know if probably you are familiar with this, that whenever there is a little baby that is born, you usually say if it is a white baby with blue eyes, then you would say, oh, very lucky. So it's gonna have a good future. And this is very common in our context. And we don't have white, but we have this idea that white is better. And because of these ideas, many other consequences have happened, and from the micro to the macro levels. And I would say that I was talking about these macro levels in some of them, especially in the English teaching field, in which we have borrowed policies, entire policies. And sometimes we don't even get a critical point of view on how they would work in our context, just because we believe they come from outside, they come from the white center practices, and then we believe it's going to be good for us because it was produced there, is European, is produced there. So this is a device that develop critical discrimination, racialization. So we believe that this is natural. It's natural that we say that we discriminate people, and we don't question it because, well, it's fine. What's the problem there? What's the problem of believing that American people are good looking and we are not? That's okay. But it's probably because that has been created in these discourses in which we have been exposed, and we haven't been critical about those, how these discourses have come to us and how we have consumed these discourses, and we just develop practices and make them natural. And so race, that's why it's difficult. It was really difficult for me to work on the topic of race in the context of Colombia, because usually people tend to believe that there is no racism, so there is no race differences, so we are all equal, we are all the same. But you have to inspect very well, because it's not just referring to the difference between black and white, but these differences that make us believe that there are groups that are better than others. For example, I was interviewing a teacher very well some time ago, and he was always saying, I asked him, are you part of any racial group? And he said, no, I'm not. I'm not Afro-Colombian. I'm not an indigenous person. I don't belong to these groups. So this is a very common answer in our context, because we believe just race is based on that. So we need to analyze it from different lenses, but always having this point of view of hierarchies and differences and stereotypes between different groups. I don't know if I answered Jessit's questions, but
well, I guess you already saw like all the interaction that is going on right now in the chat box based on Jessit's question, and of course he was also interacting there. And yes, he says yes, Ximena, thanks. Yes, somehow.
okay. Okay, I'm glad.
All right.
Well, I don't know if there are more questions. I'm checking. One approach may be intersubjective relationships, race, and gender.
Right.
Well, critical race theories, despite they talk about race in the center, this is the main interest, they also discuss that race never happens by itself. You always, whenever you talk about race, you also talk about class, or you may talk about gender, because they are extremely related, they are intersected, and these relationships are necessary to account for one of them. So, but you will find very interesting things. Something that happens to me when I was doing my study was that I was not aware that many people who are in the street asking for money belong to these minority groups, right? And I was not aware of that. I was aware of that after I started working on race. So then I could see that this relationship between class and race are connected. And why? Well, I started trying to understand that, and they are connected because of historical heritage. Because when we were colonized, well, this separation of groups, and when we have this abolition of slavery, it didn't happen as we think. Like we think that it was abolished and then it finished. But actually, well, black communities had a long time in which I can tell you that even in year 1851 that was abolished the slavery, it took like 50 years for them to start being really free, because this law had a lot of let's say adornments in which they said, well, you will be free, but you will be free only when the first woman who has a baby who is pregnant is going to be free when he is 18 years old. So you see how they postpone that freedom. And well, that when they were free, they didn't have a job, they didn't have a house, they have to find a place, and they started to work as servants. So that was another different type of slavery. And well, many things of what we see nowadays, why are regions of in Colombia that are very poor and that they are usually related to Black people, because many people at that time had to go away from what they call at that time civilization, because they didn't have a good place to live, and they didn't have the conditions, so they had to find the conditions themselves, and they have built these conditions throughout the time with a lot of difficulties. So that is reflected nowadays. So it makes the connection between race and class, although that's why it is difficult to see it as racism, but it is racism. It is structural racism developed throughout the history.
Right. Thank you, Ximena. I am super glad that you had this webinar today for us to share those ideas. Everyone was interacting with you throughout your conversation, your presentation. So I think everyone is still engaged. Thank you. Thank you very much. And this is, I guess, well, as I said before, this is the first of 3 webinars that are going to be about the same topic. So hopefully all of you who were here today could join us the next Thursday and also in 2 weeks' time, so that we can see the same topic from 2 different perspectives. And of course, your contributions are more than welcome. Thank you all for having made the space in your agendas. And I hopefully will see you next Thursday. Ximena as well. Thank you very much. Once again, I mean, thank you, Carlo, Yesid. I didn't know that you were here. Thank you all for having come to this presentation. And once again, I will see you next Thursday, and we're going to find some more interesting and fruitful ideas to put into our practice as teachers. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. Once again, thank you, Yolanda, Julia, Yesid, Carlo, Jose Aldemar, of course, all of you who were helping, contributing to this enriching conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for everybody to be here today, and for listening to this short talk about the topic. I hope we can share more ideas about this later in other presentations. And thank you for the people I know who are here too.
Yeah, next Thursday, Ximena.
Next Thursday?
Yes, yes.
Oh, yeah, of course.
All right. Have a great afternoon, Ximena, as well. Thank you. Thank you very much. And have a good afternoon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. I don't know how to get out of here.
Stand up, open the door. You go to where it says end, right button corner in red.
Oh my God.
It says end.
Uh-oh.
Salir, nena, salir. Abrazos.
Goodbye, Yolanda.
Yolanda, please.
You see This is
I'm
bullying.
just bothering.
Bullying, and this is being video recorded.